What if climate change was reversed? We are all heard of global warming and how bad it is for us humans and the planet as a whole. But what if instead of getting warmer, the Earth began to cool down at an accelerated rate? How would life on Earth be affected by climate change going into reverse? Would we freeze to death, or could there be other problems that arise from such a phenomenon? Let's find out in today's video. What if climate change was reversed? As temperatures dropped, people around the world would likely begin to rejoice. Hot days and heat waves are no fun. And when it comes to the cold, most of us can bundle up and stay warm indoors. But that feeling of elation would be short-lived. The sudden drop in temperature may feel refreshing at first, but soon people would start to die. In fact, according to Dr. Adam Hadfield, the average annual temperature on Earth is about 57 degrees Fahrenheit or 14 degrees Celsius. In the winter, it's around 39 degrees Fahrenheit or 4 degrees Celsius. So if global cooling was to take hold and the average temperature suddenly dropped below 4 degrees, there would be mass casualties among the human population. That's because the human body can only survive for 15 minutes in such temperatures. Any longer and hypothermia kicks in, causing the body's internal temperature to drop, eventually resulting in death. Of course, some people might be able to survive longer than others, but the chances of anyone surviving more than 2 hours in these conditions is slim to none. Of course, this isn't the only way that a reversal of climate change would affect us humans. While scientists debate whether or not global warming is reversible, they do agree that global cooling can be reversed. According to NASA researchers, it could be as simple as reducing carbon dioxide emissions. And while that sounds like a pretty straightforward solution, the reality is much more complicated. For example, even though human activity has been linked to increased CO2 levels in the atmosphere, natural processes such as volcanic eruptions also have an impact. If we were to stop emitting CO2 altogether, it would still take decades, if not centuries, for the levels in the atmosphere to return to normal. And that is just one of the many factors that scientists need to consider when trying to figure out how to reverse climate change. Others include ocean currents, the amount of sunlight that reaches the surface of the Earth, and the reflectivity of different parts of the planet. And because our planet is so complex, any attempt to reverse climate change could have unintended consequences. For example, if we were to start pumping carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, it could lead to a runaway greenhouse effect. On the other hand, if we were to try to cool the planet by reflecting more sunlight back into space, it could disrupt the delicate balance of gases in the atmosphere, leading to all sorts of problems. But let's assume that we were able to reverse climate change without causing any unintended consequences. What would happen next? Well, for starters, we'd likely see a decrease in the number of natural disasters. Floods, droughts, and storms are all made worse by rising temperatures. So as the planet cools, these disasters would become less frequent. We'd also likely see a decrease in the number of people who die from heat-related illnesses. According to the CDC, more than 700 people die each year in the US from heat stroke and other heat-related causes. As temperatures drop, this number would likely decrease. But there are also some negative effects that come with cooler temperatures. For example, as the planet cools, crops are likely to fail and food shortages will occur. This is because most crops require a certain amount of warmth in order to grow. When the temperature drops below this level, plants will struggle to grow and produce the amount of food that we need to sustain ourselves. This could lead to widespread famine and starvation. The problem is that we do know exactly how much the planet would have to cool in order to cause these problems. Some experts believe that even a 1-degree drop could have catastrophic consequences. Others say that we need to see a drop of several degrees before we start to see widespread crop failures. Either way, it's clear that a sudden change in temperature would have serious consequences for our food supply. And that's not all. A drop in temperature would also likely cause energy prices to skyrocket. That's because we use a lot of energy to keep warm in the winter. And when the temperature drops, demand for energy goes up. This puts a strain on our energy infrastructure, which could lead to higher prices. Of course, some people would benefit from lower energy prices. Those who live in hot climates and use a lot of air conditioning in the summer would see their energy bills go down. But overall, the effect would be negative. Higher energy prices would lead to higher costs for businesses, which would likely result in job losses and economic downturn. In fact, some experts believe that global cooling could be worse for the economy than global warming. That is because most of the world's economies are geared towards producing goods and services for a growing population. If global cooling causes crop failures and starvation, it would likely lead to a collapse of these economies. Global warming, on the other hand, is more gradual, which gives us time to adapt. We can take steps to protect our crops and our infrastructure from the effects of rising temperatures. But a sudden drop in temperature would catch us off guard. It is hard to say exactly how the world economy would be affected by a sudden drop in temperature. But what we can say is that it would definitely be disrupted. Of course, these are just some of the ways that global cooling would affect us humans. There are likely many other ways that we haven't even thought of yet. The bottom line is that our planet is a very delicate system, and any changes to the climate, whether they're positive or negative, can have serious consequences. Now, let's shift our focus to animals. How would they be affected by climate change going into reverse? Well, just like us humans, animals would likely die from hypothermia if the temperature dropped to low. But even if that didn't happen, they would still face a host of other problems. As the planet cooled, many animals would find it difficult to find food. That's because the production of most plants would slow down, which would in turn affect the animals that eat them. For example, as the temperature drops, cows produce less milk, which means that dairy farmers would have to sell off their herds. That, in turn, would mean that the coyotes and wolves who prey on them would starve. Of course, some animals would benefit from the changing climate. Bears, for example, would be able to store more food for the winter. But overall, the effects of climate change going into reverse would be negative for the animal kingdom. And it's not just individual animals that would suffer, entire ecosystems would collapse. As the planet cooled, the balance of predator and prey would be thrown off. New diseases would emerge and many species would go extinct. In fact, some experts believe that we could lose up to a quarter of all species on Earth if the planet were to cool by just 2 degrees. But what if we were able to reverse climate change without causing any harm to animals or the ecosystem? What then? Well, for starters, we'd likely see a resurgence of some animal species that have gone extinct due to rising temperatures. For example, the bramble-K warren, a small mammal that lived on an island in Australia, went extinct in 2019 after its habitat was destroyed by rising sea levels. If the planet were to cool and sea levels were to fall, the bramble-K warren could once again call Australia home. But even if some species were able to make a comeback, others wouldn't be so lucky. That's because a sudden change in climate would put a lot of stress on animals. Even if they didn't die from hypothermia or starvation, they could die from other causes. For example, a sudden drop in temperature could weaken their immune systems, making them more susceptible to disease. What's more, a sudden change in climate would also affect the migration patterns of many animals. For example, birds that migrate south for the winter would find that their new destination is no longer hospitable. This could lead to mass die-offs among migrating birds. So what if we were able to reverse climate change without causing any harm to animals? What then? The answer is that there would still be some negative consequences. The animal kingdom would be thrown into chaos and many species would not survive. Ultimately, it's clear that climate change is a serious problem. Whether it's global warming or global cooling, any significant change to the climate would have serious consequences for the planet and its inhabitants. But what do you think? What would you rather experience, global warming or global cooling? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching.